Hello. My name is Fern Riven, and 3 minutes after this moment, I'll be erased from the company I built, handed $10,000 like a thank you card at my own funeral. They don't know I saw it coming. They don't know I'm not leaving quietly. They don't know I never forget who signs the blueprints. And in exactly 3 minutes they'll regret forgetting mine. The room was silent in that calculated way, glass walls muting everything but not enough to make me forget the city pulsing outside. South Lake Union shimmered like it always did, indifferent, humming with energy and early spring light. Inside the boardroom, the air was clinical. The chairs were too modern to be comfortable. The kind of room designed to impress people who already felt untouchable. I didn't sit. Callista stood by the window, arms folded across a blazer that probably cost more than my rent. Her expression was polished, unbothered, until she turned and gave me that practiced, CEO-grade smile. The one with no temperature. "You're early," she said. I didn't reply. I just looked at the folder on the table. White. Thick. Labeled with my name. She motioned toward it. "That's for you." I stepped closer, the smell of fresh print and ink sharp under the overhead light. My fingers hovered before lifting the flap. Inside, a check. $10,000. And a post-it. "We're grateful. No hard feelings." I stared at the handwriting. She'd used my favorite pen, the one she stole from my drawer last Christmas. $10,000. For 14-hour days. For weekends. For writing every line of code that saved her pitch in the final hour. For the prototype she called impossible until I made it real. For naming the system Sentinel Shield, because she said it sounded like something people would trust. $10,000. I didn't feel my knees lock, but they did. My hand gripped the folder tighter than I wanted it to. I told myself not to blink too fast. Not to breathe too shallow. "Don't look at it that way," she said lightly. "It's a thank you. A big one." My voice was a thin thread. "This isn't a bonus, Callista." She paused. Her eyes didn't flinch. "Well, technically, it's a separation gift." That was when the door opened. A woman stepped in, tall, stiff, dark suit. Legal rep. She didn't introduce herself. She carried a single sheet of paper. "Ms. Riven," she said to me, like we were strangers at an airport. "Per our restructuring, your role is no longer required. Effective immediately." I barely heard the rest. Something about transition terms. NDA. A non-disparagement clause. Severance package. No eye contact. Not even from Callista. My badge was deactivated before I reached for it. The legal woman placed an envelope on the table, same pristine white as the first. It looked like a twin. Like this betrayal had been photocopied. "You're brilliant, Fern," Callista said suddenly, like we were back in our shared dorm at MIT. "But the company needs more than just ideas. It needs structure. Vision." The words fell out of her mouth like she'd rehearsed them with a mirror. My knuckles whitened around the envelope. I said nothing. I didn't trust my voice not to tremble, and that would have pleased her. It wasn't the money. It was the price tag she thought would quiet me. I looked at her, really looked. Her lips painted just slightly darker than her blazer. Hair styled for camera, not comfort. She looked like success. She looked like someone who'd never cried over being invisible at the dinner table. I'd done that. I'd cried alone, with the laptop glowing beside me, while Callista stood on stage getting applause for things I'd built. And I still showed up. Security met me at the glass door before I could gather everything from my desk. They stood stiffly, politely, pretending not to notice my shaking hands. I packed a box with my name on it. Funny. It was the first time my name had appeared anywhere in this building in months. I didn't speak to anyone on the way out. No one looked at me directly. That was her effect. Callista made everyone polite and forgetful. The elevator ride down was painfully quiet. Just me and the guy from finance I once helped debug a spreadsheet formula. He didn't say a word. When the doors opened to the lobby, I was met with applause. Not for me. Across the atrium, a large screen played Callista's live stream. Her voice projected, proud and silky. "We did it," she said, beaming. "From scratch. With no outside help." My lungs deflated. Not like a balloon popping, more like a quiet leak you can't patch. My chest felt hollow. My spine refused to hold me upright the way it used to. I walked past reception, gripping the box like it held something sacred. It didn't. Just a water bottle, a backup charger, and a photo of me and Dad, taken before he passed. He once told me, people like us don't get the microphone. We build the stage. I used to believe that was enough. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. I took the long way home. My phone vibrated 3 times. Probably automated messages, "We're sorry to see you go." Or worse, silence. My apartment was too clean. I hadn't been there enough to make a mess lately. The curtains still smelled like detergent. I set the box on the floor, sat on the couch, and didn't move. The envelope was still in my hand. I unfolded it again. The check stared back at me, smug. $10,000. I whispered it once, like it would make sense aloud. It didn't. $10,000. A thank you. A goodbye. A bribe. A burial. The room felt too quiet. My own breath sounded foreign. Then, without thinking, I opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life. I navigated to the old development folder, buried under layers of archived work. Sentinel Shield _Alpha 1. Line 482. My comment was still there. Override failsafe, Rivenoth only. Manual authorization required. They'd left it. My name. My control line. My fingerprint. A soft sound escaped my throat. It wasn't a laugh. Not really. I closed the laptop slowly. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been erased. The air in my apartment felt heavier than it should have. Not the weight of dust or time, but something quieter, like the residue of a life lived for someone else. The blinds were half drawn, the sunset cutting narrow gold lines across the floor. I sat on the edge of the couch, the laptop still open on the coffee table. Its faint hum filled the room, a sound too familiar to be comforting. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred with the lines of code. Every keystroke, every annotation I'd ever written still existed, like ghosts that refused to move on. I scrolled through the repository, the cursor blinking beside my own initials. Fernar. That was me. Still here. Still invisible. Somewhere inside the folder, there was a line of code that bore my name. I searched for it, page after page, until it appeared, quiet and defiant. Algorithmic override only if Fernar authorizes manually. It was such a small sentence, but it felt like a fingerprint pressed into concrete. Proof that I had existed inside the machine before they decided to rewrite history. My chest tightened. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow, the way a room sounds after someone slams the door. I whispered to the screen, "They erased me like a typo." My voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. The truth already knew its shape. A soft ping interrupted the silence. The email alert blinked in the corner of my screen. Unknown sender. Subject line, "You don't deserve this." My hand hovered before I clicked. The message was short, written like someone afraid to be caught. I saw what they did. You created Sentinel Shield, not her. We all know. I stayed quiet because I have bills to pay. But someone needs to say it. E. Morrow. Ellis. I remembered him, quiet, sharp, always typing faster than he spoke. The kind of engineer who disappeared into code to survive the politics. I leaned back against the couch and let the words sink in. The validation hit harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone said, "You did this." My breath came unevenly. For a moment, I let myself feel it, the grief, the disbelief, the sudden pulse of something alive again. I typed a reply but deleted it before sending. Gratitude felt too small. Revenge felt too loud. I settled on silence, the kind that grows into purpose. My apartment was still cluttered with unpacked boxes from 2 years ago. One of them was labeled Home Office, though I'd never set it up. I dug through it until I found an old notebook, the one Dad gave me before I left for college. On the first page, in his messy handwriting, "Build something that can't be taken from you." I traced the words with my fingertip. "Guess I failed that one," I whispered. But quietly, gently, I felt the first spark of defiance. Maybe not failed, just paused. The light outside dimmed into violet. The city started to hum again, traffic crawling along the wet streets. I stood and walked to the window. Fremont looked smaller from up here, rows of rooftops glowing like embers in the fog. Somewhere across town, Callista was probably sipping wine, celebrating her vision. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Saw the announcement. "So proud of both my girls. Callista says you're taking a break? You always needed one." I laughed softly, without humor. A break. That's what they called it when you were pushed out. When your work became someone else's crown. Mom never asked for my side. She never did. I started typing a reply, then erased it. Instead, I opened the console again, scrolling through lines of code until the numbers blurred. The longer I looked, the more the betrayal took shape, not a single event, but a pattern. Every note of encouragement from Callista, every promise of partnership, it was all just scaffolding for a future where she could stand alone on the stage. The betrayal wasn't new. It was just louder now. My thoughts drifted back to childhood dinners, to Callista's laughter filling every silence. She was always the story, and I was always the audience. Dad used to joke, "You two balance each other, one shines, one builds." Back then, it felt like harmony. Now it felt like prophecy. I shut the laptop and rubbed my eyes. The glow of the screen lingered against my eyelids, leaving ghostly outlines of code. My heartbeat synced with the faint rhythm of the refrigerator. Everything around me kept moving, machines doing what they were programmed to do. Maybe that's what I'd been too. Programmed to support, to stay quiet, to believe. I stood, pacing. The floor creaked under my bare feet. I needed air, something real, something that didn't hum or blink. I opened the window. The smell of rain came rushing in, clean, metallic, like the start of something new. "Enough," I whispered. The word came out steadier than I felt. On the counter, my phone vibrated again. Another email. Same sender. "They're deleting logs tomorrow. I'll send copies tonight. Keep them safe." Attached was a compressed file. I downloaded it, heart pounding. Inside, a series of chat transcripts between Callista and the board. Phrases jumped out like accusations. "She's too introverted to lead. We can spin her contributions as technical support. Investors prefer a single face." Each message was a knife sharpened with politeness. I read them twice, the words carving deeper each time. When I finally looked up, the sky outside had turned black. Streetlights flickered against the rain. I saved the file in 3 different folders, one on the cloud, one on a flash drive, and one hidden in an old email draft. My fingers moved automatically, like muscle memory of survival. Then I shut everything down. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was deliberate. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years: Dad's watch, a few Polaroids, a flash drive labeled in my handwriting, "Original, do not delete." I held it carefully, as if it could bruise. That drive contained the first prototype, the raw version of Sentinel Shield before Callista rebranded it. It was the one I built alone in my apartment during those months when she was networking. Back then, she'd said, "You're better at the technical side, Fern. I'll handle the people." I had believed her. I wanted to believe her. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The familiar hum returned, softer this time. A list of files appeared, timestamps from nights when I forgot to eat, forgotten weekends, birthdays spent debugging. Every sacrifice had a date. Every sleepless night had a record. And there, at the bottom, was a folder named testbuild_Fern v1. I opened it. The interface loaded, old but intact. My design, my code, my language. I whispered, "You're still here." My reflection on the screen looked tired but steadier. The pain was still there, but so was something else, a thin strand of resolve winding its way through the cracks. Healing doesn't arrive suddenly. It happens softly, line by line. I closed the laptop and sat for a moment, breathing in the rain-soaked air. The city outside pulsed with neon light, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. They had stolen my invention. They had rewritten the story. But they hadn't rewritten me. Quietly, gently, I whispered to the dark, "You missed a line, Callista. You missed me." The storm outside had passed, but the sound of water still slipped down the gutters, soft and rhythmic, like the city was whispering secrets to itself. I sat in front of my laptop, the light from the screen painting the walls pale blue. My fingers hovered over the keys. I should have been exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. I opened my inbox again, rereading Ellis's email until the words lost shape. He hadn't just sent files, he had cracked open a door I didn't realize was still locked. I clicked on the thread we'd started 2 years ago, back when everything was still a promise. The earliest messages glowed faintly in the archives, a timeline of ambition that now felt like betrayal carved in pixels. "Let's launch this together," Callista had written. You'll handle the tech, I'll handle the talking. It's just temporary, Fern. Once we're stable, we'll formalize everything. I could almost hear her voice, smooth, confident, threaded with charm that always got her what she wanted. I remembered the way she'd touched my shoulder that day in her apartment kitchen. You hate attention anyway. I'll be the face. You'll be the brain. We'll make a perfect team. She was right about one thing, I did hate attention. It always felt like standing under a microscope, too bright, too sharp, every flaw magnified. I told myself I didn't mind staying in the background. But looking back now, I see what it really was. It wasn't humility. It was conditioning. My mind wandered to Tacoma, to the house that always smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish. In my memory, the kitchen light flickered. Mom stood at the stove, humming some church tune she'd forgotten the lyrics to. Callista, 3 years older, twirled in a new dress. Dad clapped. You look like you belong on stage, Callie. Then his eyes drifted toward me, seated on the floor with an old calculator I'd taken apart. He smiled absently. And Fern, you'll probably build the stage. He meant it kindly, but even then, I understood. One of us was meant to shine. The other to hold the light steady. I blinked, pushing the memory away. The laptop fan hummed louder. I searched for the company's website, titantechsolutions.com. The homepage loaded instantly, sleek and sterile, her favorite colors, ivory and gold. I clicked on About Us. There she was. Callista Riven, founder and visionary. The bio read, built from scratch. A self-taught innovator redefining cybersecurity. Not a word about me. I scrolled further, as if my name might be hidden in some legal disclaimer at the bottom. Nothing. Not even in the early press releases I'd ghostwritten myself. A laugh caught in my throat, too sharp to sound like amusement. I typed my own name into the search bar. Fern Riven Sentinel Shield. The results filled the page, articles, investor reports, interviews, all pointing back to her. Headlines like, Female CEO Leads Revolutionary Security Breakthrough. Each photo showed Callista standing under bright lights, smiling as if she'd conquered the world. In one image, she wore the same necklace our father gave her when she graduated. The same one he promised to buy me when I finished my master's, except the company went under and he couldn't afford it. I leaned closer to the screen. Her posture was perfect. Her smile rehearsed. In the reflection, I could see my own face, pale and tired, framed by the blue glow of everything she'd taken. You don't like being in front of people anyway, she'd said to me once when I hesitated to join a pitch meeting. Just do what you're good at. And what I was good at was never meant to have a name. I closed the tab and stared at the blank space on my browser. My heartbeat felt uneven, like a skipped rhythm in an old song. For a moment, I imagined calling her. Asking why. Demanding something human. But I could already hear her tone, calm, polished, practiced. You're overreacting, Fern. It's business. You're too emotional about these things. That word, emotional, she'd always used it like an insult. I stood and paced to the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Across the street, an elderly man fed a stray cat under the awning of a grocery store. He moved slowly, gently, as if the world had finally granted him permission to take his time. I envied that. Behind me, the laptop screen dimmed, returning to the login page. My reflection shimmered faintly, layered over the login box. For the first time, I noticed how much I looked like her, the same eyes, the same stubborn jawline. Except hers was always aimed upward, mine always slightly down. The distance between those angles had cost me everything. I walked back and reopened the archives. Each folder opened like a memory, late nights, shared takeout boxes, whispered plans. I remembered the day we filed for the company license. She insisted it would be cleaner under her name. Just until we stabilize, she'd said. Investors prefer one signature. We'll amend it later. Later never came. I found the text exchange from the night before that meeting. Me, are you sure about this? It doesn't feel right. Callista, don't start with your trust issues. We're sisters. I'd never hurt you. I stared at that line for a long time. The cursor blinked beside it, as if waiting for me to answer 2 years late. I whispered, you already did. The hum of my laptop deepened, the fan spinning harder. I saved the page and closed the lid. But the ache didn't close with it. I walked into the kitchen and poured water into a chipped mug. The faucet squeaked, everything in this apartment did. I hadn't replaced or repaired much since moving here. I used to call it temporary. Another lie I'd borrowed from Callista. When I returned to the couch, the light from the street lamps filtered through the blinds, striping my walls with golden shadow. I sat back, cradling the mug in both hands, feeling the warmth seep slowly into my palms. I thought of the first time she'd used my work publicly. It wasn't Sentinel Shield back then, it was just an idea, a rough sketch scribbled on a napkin between bites of diner fries. She'd taken the napkin, folded it neatly, and said, "You should keep this safe." I never saw it again. Maybe that's when it started, not the theft, but the training. The slow conditioning to let her lead, to let her take credit, to smile when the spotlight missed me. I placed the mug down and pulled my old phone from the drawer. It still had messages from Dad saved under favorites. The last one he sent before he passed: "Proud of you, kiddo. Don't let them shrink you to fit their picture." I wiped a tear before it could fall. Softly, quietly, I whispered, "I'm trying, Dad." The clock ticked toward midnight. I reopened the laptop, my hand steadier now. I deleted the search history, cleared the cache, erased every trace of tonight's spiral. Then, at the bottom of the bookmarks bar, I added a new link labeled, "Truth." For now, it led nowhere. But it would. The rain began again, gentler this time, tapping against the window like an old friend. I watched the drops gather, slide, and vanish. Healing doesn't arrive suddenly, it happens softly, drop by drop. I clicked one last time, bringing up the company homepage again. My eyes lingered on her smiling photo. I pressed delete. The browser hesitated, then asked if I was sure. "Yes," I whispered. The screen went white. I minimized everything else and opened a hidden directory at the bottom of my drive. An encrypted folder shimmered into view. Its title: "She Didn't Build This." My fingers trembled slightly as I hovered over it. The password came to me without thinking. It opened. Inside were blueprints, prototypes, journal entries, and every recorded version of Sentinel Shield from the beginning. Each file a breadcrumb leading back to me. I exhaled slowly, letting the sound dissolve into the hum of the apartment. For the first time that night, the air felt breathable again. Softly, gently, I closed the laptop and leaned back. Somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, a quiet thought anchored itself inside me. She may have stolen my invention. But she didn't build my story. Morning came with a sky too bright for how heavy I felt inside. The city outside my window was rinsed clean from the night's rain, and every surface gleamed like it was pretending nothing bad had ever happened. I made coffee, the cheap kind that tasted more like smoke than comfort, and sat by the window trying to convince myself I still belonged somewhere in this city. I opened my laptop out of habit. The first tab that loaded wasn't my inbox or my code archive, it was a podcast recommendation. The title caught my eye, "Building from Nothing, How Vision Beats Raw Talent." My chest tightened before I even pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Callista's voice. Smooth, easy, practiced. The same tone she used to talk to investors, to Mom, to anyone she wanted to charm. "Some people," she said, "are brilliant behind the screen. But vision, it takes charisma. Leadership." The host laughed, a short, shallow sound. "Ah, the invisible genius trope. Classic. There's always one, isn't there?" Callista laughed too. It was soft, but sharp enough to cut. "Yes. But it's better for everyone when the story has one clear face." I pressed pause, but the laughter lingered, echoing through my apartment until the silence felt too loud. I sat very still. My hands were flat on the table, trembling slightly though I told them not to. That was how she did it, she turned betrayal into a punchline. I reached for my phone. The message from Ellis popped up as if it had been waiting. "I'm ready if you are. I still have the logs. We can prove it." I stared at the words for a long time. They looked like an open door, but I wasn't sure what waited on the other side. My reflection on the laptop screen looked tired. My eyes were ringed with shadows, but something else flickered beneath them, a small, dangerous light. "I was never meant to be remembered," I whispered. "Just to be useful." Until I wasn't. The phone buzzed again. A notification. Trending now, Callista Riven's exclusive founders dinner. I clicked. Photos filled the feed, her standing under a chandelier, smiling wide, a glass of champagne in her hand. The caption read, "From napkin sketch to unicorn valuation." In the center photo, she was holding the prototype. My prototype. And I saw it immediately, like recognizing your own handwriting on a stranger's letter. The small engraving near the corner, FR. My initials. Only they'd been blurred out, digitally softened until they looked like a smudge. I closed the laptop too fast, the sound echoing in the small apartment. My pulse raced. She'd blurred me out of my own creation. Again. I stood and paced the room, running my fingers along the back of the couch, the counter, anything to ground myself. The quiet felt dangerous now, like it might swallow me whole. A memory surfaced, Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Mom's kitchen, full of noise and burnt rolls. Callista talking about the startup, her voice animated, her hands painting the air. It's going to be huge, Mom. Investors are already calling. Mom had smiled at her like she'd hung the moon. That's my girl. Then she'd looked at me, dish towel in hand. And Fern, you're helping, right? You've always been such a good helper. Helper. Not partner. Not equal. I could still feel the heat of that moment, the way I'd smiled to keep from shattering. Now, in the cool light of this morning, the memory didn't sting, it burned clean. I reopened my laptop. The browser still showed the blurred photo. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. I stared at the empty space where my initials should have been. Then I clicked save. Evidence. A message bubble popped up from Ellis again. She's not untouchable, Fern. She just thinks she is. I typed back before I could stop myself. Then let's stop being useful. And start being seen. I hesitated before hitting send. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Then I pressed enter. The reply came almost instantly. Good. I'll prep the files. You focus on the paperwork. Paperwork. The word sounded dull, but behind it was power. I opened a new tab, hands shaking slightly, and searched, Intellectual Property, Retrospective Filings, Washington State. The page loaded with sterile efficiency, like every government website, too many boxes, too many disclaimers. But I didn't look away this time. I filled in my name. My invention's name. My details. Each keystroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Halfway through, I stopped. My eyes fell on the section labeled Original Conception Date. I thought of the diner napkin, the late nights, the emails she called brain dumps. I thought of Dad's voice telling me to build something they couldn't take. My throat tightened. The cursor blinked, patient. Waiting. I typed the date. I saved the draft. Then I closed the laptop and walked out of the apartment. The air outside was cool, the kind that smelled faintly of rain and new beginnings. I needed to move. Needed to see something that wasn't a screen or a ghost of myself. The cafe on View Ridge was already buzzing with morning regulars. The smell of espresso and sugar clung to the air. I took a seat near the window, the kind of spot Callista would have picked for a photo shoot. I pulled the laptop from my bag and opened it again. Around me, people talked softly about normal things, mortgages, weather, grandkids. I envied them for a moment. Their worlds had no screens recording betrayals. The podcast autoplayed again from where it had paused. Callista's voice filled the cafe. I yanked my earbuds out, but it was too late. A woman at the next table smiled. That her? The tech lady everyone's talking about? I nodded, forcing a polite smile. That's her. She's something, huh? You gotta love women like that, finally showing the guys how it's done. I wanted to say, she didn't do it. But the words stuck in my throat. They would sound like bitterness coming from me. So I just said, yeah, something like that. She went back to her paper. I went back to the form. My fingers steadied with every click. Outside, the light shifted, soft and forgiving. Healing doesn't announce itself, it creeps in quietly, under the noise. I uploaded the documentation Ellis had sent, attached my credentials, and hit save. Before closing the browser, I allowed myself one small act of rebellion. I opened the company's website again. The photo of Callista loading the prototype stared back at me, perfect and untouched. I right-clicked, saved a copy, renamed it, proof_001. Then I sat back, exhaled, and sipped my coffee. The bitterness tasted almost right. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too easy, too temporary. What I felt now was purpose, a slow, steady flame that refused to die. On the table beside my cup, the laptop screen glowed softly. My name filled the form again and again until the page timed out. I reopened it. Finished the submission. The confirmation box appeared, your filing has been received. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I smiled, small, quiet, but real. For the first time, my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I packed up my things, stood, and glanced once more at the window. Outside, the rain had started again, gentle and persistent. I walked out into it without an umbrella. The water slid over my skin, cold and alive. Somewhere inside me, something finally clicked back into place. Softly, quietly, I whispered to myself, you can't erase someone who's still writing. 10 days later, my apartment no longer felt like a place to sleep. It had turned into a command center. Folders covered the dining table, sticky notes mapped my walls, and half-drained coffee cups guarded every corner like exhausted sentinels. The hum of the printer filled the silence that used to feel unbearable. Now it sounded like progress. I hadn't seen anyone in person since that morning in the rain. Everything I needed lived inside screens, documents, screenshots, proof that couldn't be erased. My reflection flickered in the laptop light as I joined the video call. The camera caught the dark circles under my eyes, but I didn't bother fixing them. Marin's face appeared, steady and clear. Her voice carried the kind of calm I wished I could borrow. Morning, Fern. You look like you've been at this all night. I gave a tired smile. You could say that. She nodded toward the stack of files I'd scanned and sent. I've reviewed your materials. It's impressive. You didn't just build a system, you documented every step. You timestamped every breath. The words hit me harder than they should have. For months, I'd been reduced to silence, told that proof didn't matter, that stories mattered more. Now someone said the thing I'd always known. Do we have enough? I asked quietly. More than enough, Marin replied. If they push this to court, they'll lose. But we might not have to go that far. She shared her screen. The cease and desist draft appeared, clean and precise. My name sat at the top in bold letters, something I hadn't seen in print since the day Callista fired me. My stomach twisted. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want my name. I want truth. In ink. Marin met my gaze through the camera. Then let's make sure it's permanent. Her voice was professional, but her eyes softened. She'd seen this before, people crushed under someone else's ambition. She knew how slow reclaiming yourself could be. As we went over each page, I caught myself tracing the corners of the screen with my fingertip, as if the texture of justice could be touched. Marin explained the process, the filing sequence, the waiting periods. I listened, nodding, pretending to absorb every detail, though my mind wandered. Somewhere across town, Callista was probably holding another meeting, rehearsing another smile. I pictured her leaning back in her leather chair, telling her team not to worry. She won't actually do it, she'd say. She's not built for confrontation. The thought made me straighten in my chair. Maybe I hadn't been built for confrontation, but I was rebuilding now. The call ended, leaving the room strangely quiet again. I sat there for a while, the cursor blinking on my desktop, as if waiting for my next move. Ellis's name flashed on my phone screen. A message. She knows you're moving. Her PR team scrubbed the site last night. I read it twice. My heart thudded once, hard. I opened the browser immediately. The company's website loaded, but the images were gone. Press releases, award photos, wiped clean. In their place was a single landing page, we're updating our story. My pulse quickened. I called Ellis. He answered on the second ring. You saw it? Yes. Their cleaning house. They pulled all public assets from the archive this morning, he said. But not everything's gone. The deleted drive had backups. I found something you'll want. What is it? I'll send it now. Check your email. I refreshed my inbox. A new message appeared with one attachment, prototype_sketch.jpg. I opened it. The screen filled with a photo of my original diagram, the system architecture drawn in marker on a whiteboard 2 years ago. My handwriting looped through the center, sharp and deliberate. In the corner, my initials again, FR. And under them, a note I'd written in red, do not present without my final QA. A laugh broke out of me, low and shaky. It wasn't joy. It was relief. Proof, simple and undeniable. Ellis, I said softly, you just found my heartbeat. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was small but steady. You don't deserve what she did. Just promise me you'll use this right. I will, I said. No more silence. After we hung up, I printed the photo. Watching the ink form on paper felt almost sacred. When it finished, I lifted the page gently, as if it might bruise. The smell of warm toner filled the room. The printer hummed again, spitting out more pages, contracts, timelines, receipts, everything with a date and a name. My name. I pinned the prototype photo above my desk. The edges curled slightly under the lamplight. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the night that drawing was made. Callista had sat beside me, sipping wine, saying, "We're unstoppable, Fern. Just wait. The world will know our names." Plural. Our names. Now, apparently, the world only needed one. I whispered to the photo, "They'll know mine now." The clock on my microwave blinked 11:47 a.m. The day had vanished without permission. My shoulders ached. I walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. The air smelled faintly of ink and caffeine. When the phone rang again, I nearly dropped the mug. Marin's name glowed on the screen. "Fern," she said when I answered, "I've finalized the notice. You ready to make this official?" "I've been ready," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. "All right. Let's read it together." I sat back down, coffee cooling beside me, and listened as she spoke. Notice of intellectual infringement, Fern Riven versus Callista Riven. Hearing it aloud made something inside me settle. My throat felt tight, but not with fear. It was something else, recognition. The sound of my own name reclaiming its place in the world. Marin continued reading, each sentence a small act of restoration. She ended with, "All materials created under the research timeline 2019 through 2022 are hereby identified as the intellectual property of Ms. Fern Riven, inventor and sole architect of Sentinel Shield." The silence that followed was gentle, almost reverent. Marin exhaled softly. "I'll send this by certified mail and electronic copy. Once she receives it, her team will have 72 hours to respond. Are you sure you're ready for whatever comes next?" "I am." She smiled faintly. "Then congratulations. You've just fired the first warning shot." When the call ended, I stayed in the chair, staring at my name on the top of the screen. My hands hovered above the keyboard. I didn't cry. The tears had already been spent months ago. What replaced them now was a calm I didn't recognize, something like peace, but sharper. Outside, the late afternoon light shifted across the buildings. It glowed soft and golden, the way it used to look when Dad sat on the porch, explaining how blueprints worked. "You build it once here," he'd say, tapping the paper, "so they can never say they imagined it first." He was right. I walked over to the window and pressed my palm against the glass. The city below was alive and unbothered. Somewhere down there, Callista was about to learn what it felt like to be on the other side of silence. Slowly, gently, I whispered, "I don't want revenge. I want recognition." The light flickered against the printed photo above my desk, catching the red ink of my handwriting. My name glowed faintly in the reflection, a quiet, steady proof that I had existed all along. 3 days after the notice went out, the world suddenly learned my name. It started as a whisper in the tech blogs, small articles tucked between IPO updates and gadget reviews. Insider leak, cease and desist filed against Titan Tech CEO Callista Riven. My phone buzzed nonstop that morning, each notification tightening around my chest like a belt. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment. I just watched. The truth had finally left my hands. By noon, the whisper turned into thunder. Investors wanted answers. Employees started questioning why the system repository had been locked overnight. My email filled with messages from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Some said, "Good for you, Fern." Others warned me, "Be careful. Callista's not the type to back down." They were right. She wasn't. The news mentioned the investor Q&A scheduled that afternoon at Titan Tech's headquarters. It would stream live, press, shareholders, analysts, all waiting for her to perform confidence. I brewed coffee and set my laptop on the counter. I told myself I wouldn't watch. But when the stream started, my finger found the play button anyway. The camera panned across the room, glossy marble floors, white chairs lined like soldiers, a backdrop of blue light that made everything look sterile and expensive. Callista stepped onto the stage. Her hair was perfect, her blazer pressed. She smiled that effortless smile, the one I used to mistake for warmth. Good afternoon, everyone, she began. We're thrilled about Titan Tech's growth this quarter. Sentinel Shield continues to redefine cybersecurity worldwide. Hearing her say the name still made my stomach twist. She paused for questions, expecting flattery. Instead, an investor in the front row raised his hand. Can you address the recent claim of intellectual infringement? The smile faltered. That's being handled privately, she said quickly. Handled privately, he repeated. The cease and desist references internal documentation, phrasing identical to your product pitch. Is that coincidence? The camera zoomed in on her face. A pulse flickered in her jaw. She laughed, brittle and brief. Our team often uses similar language for consistency. Another voice cut in, firmer this time. Who is Fern Riven? The room went quiet. Even the sound of air conditioning seemed to vanish. Callista blinked once, twice. She was a consultant, she finally said. Brilliant, but no longer affiliated. A lie dressed in politeness. The kind she'd always told. I sat back on the couch and whispered to the screen, consultant? Try creator. Reporters started murmuring. One held up his phone. Is it true you used her early prototype without acknowledgement? Callista's fingers gripped the microphone. This line of questioning isn't productive. Let's move on. She looked off camera for rescue, but no one moved. The tension was visible even through pixels. I could almost smell the panic behind her perfume. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Ellis. Check Twitter. Right now. I switched tabs. A video was climbing fast under the tag credit fern. The clip was grainy but clear enough, Callista standing in a conference room, addressing her engineering team. Her voice sharp, impatient. She was just back-end support, she snapped. I built the vision. She wrote code. Don't romanticize it. Someone off camera mumbled, but the original schema. She followed my outline, Callista interrupted. I can replace her in a week. The video cut off mid-sentence, but it was enough. Thousands of comments poured in. People dissected every word, every sneer. Unbelievable. Classic theft in tech. Give Fern her credit. I covered my mouth, unsure whether to laugh or cry. My name, spoken aloud by strangers, felt heavier than I imagined. Not with reverence, but with recognition. That would do. Across the live feed, Callista's composure cracked. Her PR manager leaned in, whispering furiously. She nodded, eyes darting between cameras. We'll release a statement later today, she said. But the reporters weren't finished. Ms. Riven, one asked, how do you respond to the viral footage circulating right now? She froze. I knew that look, the half-second delay when her brain scrambled to rewrite reality faster than anyone could record it. I'm not aware of any video, she said slowly. The crowd murmured. Someone from the back shouted, everyone's seen it. Her voice sharpened. This conversation is over. The stream cut abruptly, replaced by the company logo. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. The cursor on the screen blinked like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, the silence felt like mine. My phone buzzed again, Marin this time. It's out. Damage control in progress. Don't post anything yet. I typed back, wasn't planning to. She replied, you did what the court couldn't. You let the truth talk for itself. I turned off notifications and walked to the window. The afternoon light stretched long across the city. Somewhere behind those glass towers, my sister was probably pacing, shouting into phones, demanding loyalty. I could almost hear her voice, fix it. Spin it. Make it disappear. But not this time. I remembered our last real conversation, the night she convinced me to sign over the project for legal efficiency. I had asked if we should involve a lawyer. She'd laughed. You really don't trust me, do you? It's just paperwork. I whispered now, to no one, it's never just paperwork. The evening news played in the background, anchor voices steady but eager. The tech world reels tonight after allegations against CEO Callista Riven. A leaked video appears to confirm. The image of her face filled the screen, mid-sentence, frozen between confidence and fear. I muted the TV. I didn't need to hear the rest. Later that night, I walked to the corner store. The air was crisp, the kind that carried the faint smell of rain on concrete. I passed people scrolling on their phones, reading headlines with my name in them. Some glanced up, curious. One woman smiled at me as if she recognized something but couldn't quite place it. I smiled back, gently. Back home, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat at my desk. The prototype photo still hung above it, the red ink glowing faintly under lamplight. I traced the words I'd written months ago, "Do not present without my final QA." "Guess they finally read the fine print," I murmured. The clock ticked past 11. The city lights blurred against the window, small constellations of stories unfolding without me. My phone vibrated again, an unknown number this time. "We need to talk. You win. Name your terms." I stared at the message, heart steady, breathing even. It didn't surprise me. She'd always known how to pivot, how to beg without sounding like she was begging. But this wasn't about winning anymore. I set the phone down, took another sip of wine, and let the warmth settle quietly in my chest. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away, deep and soft like the world exhaling. I whispered to the window, it was never about revenge, Callista. It was about being unerasable. I didn't respond right away. Her message sat on my screen for hours, glowing like an open wound I refused to touch. "We need to talk. You win. Name your terms." Callista had always known how to say the right thing while making sure it meant nothing. I knew that tone, graceful surrender, veiled in negotiation. She never admitted defeat. She repositioned. I poured a second glass of wine, ignored the ping of my phone, and spent the rest of that night organizing evidence. Not for court. Not for headlines. For me. For truth. For every time someone said, "You're lucky to have such a successful sister." By morning, the sun glared through the blinds like it was angry I hadn't slept. My inbox had doubled. Articles, tags, mentions. My name finally surfacing, not as rumor, not as footnote, but as the one they had erased and now couldn't ignore. Then came her second message. "Let's settle this privately. It's bad for both of us." I didn't laugh. I didn't type back. I forwarded it to Marin. She called immediately. "Fern, listen. This isn't diplomacy. It's desperation in a nice dress." "She's trying to spin it like she's being kind," I said. "She's buying time," Marin replied. "Because she's planning something." "I know. And if we play this wrong, she rewrites the story again. But if we're patient, she'll bury herself," I finished. Marin's tone softened. "You okay?" I looked around my apartment. The walls lined with notes, the prototype photo above my desk. My name finally showing up on receipts, patents, filings. "I'm steady," I said. "More than I've been in years." That afternoon, the article dropped. Business Next, exclusive, source claims Fern Riven's work was based on uncredited open-source architecture. They didn't quote me. They didn't ask. Just framed a narrative with enough smoke to suggest fire. Photos of code snippets, cropped, out of context. Excerpts from emails that made it look like I'd agreed to be anonymous. I read it 3 times. The third time slower. Then I sent it to Ellis. "I need the full chain. Every log. Every commit." He replied in 5 minutes. "Already packaged." And I flagged their image edits, they blurred metadata. I have originals. My hands didn't shake this time. They moved with precision. I zipped the logs, matched the timestamps, overlaid the code revisions. Then I uploaded everything to a secured drive and sent Marin a link. When we called later that evening, she was calm. But I could hear the edge in her voice. "We let her lie," she said. "Now we bury the lie with receipts." The next morning, the files were everywhere. Not leaked anonymously, but sent directly to the same outlets that had run Callista's smear. With documentation, source code, dated records, and expert statements. One blog titled their update, "When you edit the story, don't forget who wrote it." The hashtag shifted. From credit Fern to return her name. People started talking differently. Not just about me, but about every quiet contributor, every helper who got left off the plaque. I saw engineers I'd never met writing threads about being erased, dismissed, tokenized. And through it all, I said nothing. I stayed quiet. But not silent. For days after the smear, a panel aired, one Callista couldn't cancel. A public live stream of a tech town hall, previously scheduled to highlight inclusive leadership and innovation. I watched from my apartment. The lighting in the room was polished to a sheen. Rows of executives sat upright, cameras carefully placed. Callista wore a dark green dress, the kind that made her look like power. The host smiled too brightly. "We're so honored to have Titan Tech's CEO, Callista Riven, here to talk about the future of ethical innovation." My breath caught. Not from fear. From focus. He asked about Sentinel Shield. She answered in her usual tone, polished, rhythmic. Then came the pivot. "I want to clarify some misinformation," she said smoothly. "This product was a collaboration, yes. But I was the architect. Others contributed, but the vision was mine." That was when a second video began circulating. Ellis had found an old clip, a team meeting from 2 years ago. In it, I outlined the original design, fielded questions, discussed fallback layers. The video went viral within an hour. Screens split online, her words from today beside the video from then. The comments flooded in. "Explain this, Callista. You weren't the architect. You were the audience. Give her the credit. Give her the company." And then, on Callista's official company account. "Due to recent developments, I will be stepping back from leadership duties effective immediately." No apology. Just retreat. But I knew better. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The same way she used to step out of a losing argument just long enough to reset the room. I closed the live stream and sat very still. My phone buzzed. A message from Marin. "You did it." And then, from Ellis. "She'll try again." He was right. This wasn't over. She wasn't built to let go. But I wasn't the same sister she used to know. That night, I slept with my windows open. The air smelled like possibility and something sharper, justice, maybe. Or maybe just clarity. My last thought before drifting off was quiet, but sharp. She salted the ground and still expected me to grow guilt from it. A week later, the world had gone quieter. Not silent, just suspended, as if holding its breath before whatever came next. I could feel it even in the air, the stillness that follows a storm but carries the scent of something not yet done. When the email arrived, I almost missed it. The subject line was plain, meeting confirmation, Tech Ethics Board. Inside was an address and a time. No fanfare. No drama. Just coordinates for an ending. I ironed my shirt that morning, the first time I'd bothered in months. The steam rose, curling like memory, soft and forgiving. My reflection in the mirror looked older, steadier. Not hardened, just clarified. Some things, once burned, stopped bending. The building was beige and quiet, the kind of place built to hide conflict behind politeness. The receptionist's voice was gentle, too gentle, like she'd been told I was fragile. "Ms. Riven? They're ready for you." The conference room wasn't grand. Just gray walls, a long wooden table, 3 chairs on each side. Marin sat at one end, already flipping through a folder thick with evidence. I nodded to her, took my seat. The door opened again. Callista walked in. Late, of course. Always arriving like she was granting the room permission to start breathing. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back too tight, her lipstick a shade too bright. Her eyes flicked to me and then away, as if contact might cost her something. She set her bag down and forced a smile. "Fern. Callista." The mediator introduced himself, spoke in that smooth, neutral tone reserved for people who mistake balance for justice. "We're here to discuss an amicable resolution. Ms. Riven, you requested this session?" Callista nodded. "Yes. For the sake of family, and the company's reputation, I think it's best we settle privately." I almost laughed. For the sake of family. As if those words hadn't already been stretched beyond recognition. Marin adjusted her glasses. "We're open to hearing what Ms. Riven has to offer." Callista clasped her hands. "Look, Fern, this has gone too far. We're both suffering here. The press has twisted everything. Let's find a way to fix it. We can co-sign an NDA, retroactively include your name as co-creator, add a fair equity share, say 15%. Her tone was practiced, careful, each word polished like glass meant to reflect generosity. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I spoke softly. "You think 15% erases 3 years of theft?" Her jaw tightened. "It acknowledges your part." "My part?" I leaned forward. "You mean my work. My design. My name." "Fern, be reasonable. Marin opened a manila folder and slid it across the table. The soft scrape of paper on would cut her sentence in half. Before we talk percentages, you should see this. Callista hesitated, then opened it. Inside were the documents, code logs, signatures, timestamps, whiteboard photos, every breadcrumb of truth she'd tried to sweep away. The silence was different now. Heavier. Real. She flipped through the pages, slower with each one. Her breath hitched when she reached the old partnership agreement, our initials side by side, her signature faded but still visible. You kept it all, she whispered. No, I said quietly. I created it all. I just refused to forget. She looked up at me, eyes flashing. You really want to drag this further? You'll destroy both of us. I met her gaze, steady. This ends here. Not because you said so. Because I do. Marin's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. We're not here for revenge. Just correction. The record will reflect reality. Publicly. Callista's mask slipped. The polite smile vanished, leaving something raw beneath, fear, maybe, or the realization that she was finally cornered by truth she couldn't talk her way out of. You think the world will believe you? She asked. They already do, I said. You gave them every reason. She closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. You always had to be the martyr, didn't you? Always had to make me the villain. I didn't make you anything, I said softly. You chose the role. Her voice rose. You don't know what it's like to carry a company, to keep everyone fed, to smile when investors question your competence because you're a woman. I did what I had to do. I let her words hang. The room absorbed them like static before a storm. Then I spoke, calm but firm. And you did it on my back. You climbed while cutting my name off every rung. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time, she looked tired. Not the staged exhaustion of someone who wants sympathy, but the kind that settles deep in the bones when pretending no longer works. She turned to the mediator. Can we take a recess? He nodded, though it wasn't really a question. She stepped out, leaving the scent of her perfume lingering, sharp and artificial. Marin leaned toward me. She's breaking. Stay composed. I'm fine. You sure? I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave my hands. This isn't anger anymore. It's clarity. 10 minutes later, Callista returned. Her posture was rigid, her lipstick redrawn. She sat, pen in hand, eyes on the document. Fine, she said. You win. This isn't a win, I said gently. It's just the truth catching up. She hesitated. What happens after I sign? You step back, Marin said. The board transitions leadership. Your statement will acknowledge Fern as original creator and technical architect. You'll retain partial equity but no control. Callista's fingers twitched around the pen. And if I don't? Marin met her gaze. Then we file the lawsuit. The evidence is enough to close your company and open a criminal investigation for fraud. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Callista pressed the pen to the paper. The sound of it scratching against the page was almost tender, like something breaking quietly after resisting too long. When she finished, she pushed the paper forward. There. Happy? I didn't answer. I gathered the folder, stood, and tucked it under my arm. She looked up. That's it? You're not going to shake my hand? No, I said softly. We're done. I wish you peace, but not a platform. Her eyes flashed again, but she didn't speak. The mediator cleared his throat, signaling closure. Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. Marin walked beside me in silence until we reached the lobby. She'll hate you for this, she said quietly. She already did, I replied. But now it matters less. We stepped outside into pale sunlight. The air felt lighter, as if the city itself had exhaled with me. Marin squeezed my shoulder. You did it, Fern. Not just for you, for everyone like you. I smiled faintly. That's the hope. She left to file the paperwork, her heels clicking away on the tile. I stood there for a long moment, watching people rush past, strangers carrying coffee cups, lives untouched by my name or hers. The thought was comforting. When I finally walked toward the street, a gust of wind lifted the edge of my jacket. I looked up. The clouds had begun to break apart, sunlight cutting through in thin, clean lines. Healing, I realized, doesn't arrive suddenly. It happens softly, step by step. 3 weeks later, the city had settled back into its usual rhythm, buses sighing at intersections, coffee shops humming with the same quiet chatter, gulls circling above the sound. My world, though, had changed shape. It wasn't louder or busier, it was steadier. There were no headlines now, no lawyers calling, no messages from journalists asking for statements I no longer owed them. I woke early that morning, not from an alarm but from the gentle sound of rain. It tapped against the window in slow rhythm, steady and patient, the kind of rain that invites you to sit and listen instead of rush. I brewed tea and sat by the window with a journal I hadn't opened in years. The leather had darkened with age, the edges soft and worn. For the first time, I wrote nothing about lawsuits or betrayal. I wrote about quiet mornings like this, about how the scent of rain and the hiss of the kettle could feel like proof of life. As I wrote, I remembered Dad's voice. He'd always said that peace wasn't a place you find, it's something you build the way you'd build a bridge, slowly, deliberately, with the right tools. My bridge had taken too long to finish, but I was standing on it now. When I finished my tea, I began sorting through a storage box I'd ignored since the move from the old apartment. At the bottom, under faded invoices and a stack of empty notebooks, I found an envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly, and my name was written in his handwriting, uneven, heavy-handed, but unmistakable. For a long moment I just held it. I could almost hear him saying my name. I unfolded the letter carefully. I know you feel forgotten, it began, but the world always notices the builders, eventually. The people who lay the foundation rarely get the credit, but they know what stands because of them. Keep building, Fern. Even when no one's watching. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pressed the letter against my chest, breathing slowly until the ache eased into something softer. Dad had never seen Sentinel Shield. He hadn't lived long enough to know what I built. But somehow, he had known this moment would come. Quietly, gently, I whispered, "You were right, Dad. They see it now." The rain thickened outside, streaking the window in silver lines. I watched each drop slide down, merge with another, and disappear. Healing happens like that, I thought, connection by connection, quietly binding the broken pieces together. After lunch, I opened my laptop. Not to revisit the past, but to start something new. The idea had been sitting in the back of my mind since the mediation, a way to turn what happened into something useful. I called it the Aurora Initiative. It wasn't a company, not really. It was a fund, a small one for now, that would support women engineers who had been overlooked, dismissed, or silenced the way I had been. I'd already partnered with a community college to provide mentorship and small grants. I typed the mission statement slowly, to ensure no innovator loses her name to someone else's ambition. The first grant application appeared in my inbox 2 days later. A 22-year-old programmer named June, working nights at a diner to pay for classes. Her proposal was messy, unpolished, but it had heart. She reminded me of myself, curious, stubborn, unaware of how the world could twist brilliance into background noise. When I called her, she sounded nervous. "Are you really the Fern Riven?" "I guess I am," I said, smiling. "But that name belongs to more people than me now." She laughed, the kind of laugh that carried hope instead of cynicism. We talked about her project, about what she wanted to build. Before hanging up, she said, "I almost quit, you know. My boss told me people like me never make it far." I told her, softly, "Then prove him wrong. Quietly, if you must. But don't stop." After the call, I felt something unfamiliar, lightness. It wasn't joy exactly, but a deep sense of rightness. The kind that stays, even when the noise fades. Later that evening, I checked my messages. Among them was one from an unrecognized number. No subject line, no preamble. "Thank you for your mercy." The signature was her name. I stared at it for a long time. There were a dozen things I could have said. That it wasn't mercy. That it was survival. That the apology came too late. But none of them mattered anymore. I deleted the message. Instead, I picked up my coat and called my niece, Callista's daughter. She was 8, bright-eyed, and endlessly curious. "Want to go for a walk?" I asked. 10 minutes later, she arrived with rain boots and a smile too big for her face. "Can we jump in puddles?" I laughed softly. "Only the deep ones." We walked through the park near my apartment, puddles glimmering under the gray sky. She talked the way children do, without filters, without fear. About her science fair, about her mom being sad but busy, about wanting to invent something one day that keeps people from lying. Her words hit me quietly, like a truth too simple to ignore. That's a good goal, I said. I think you already did it, she said, kicking water toward my boots. Mom said you built a thing that tells when people are bad online. I smiled. Something like that. She stopped walking and looked up at me. Mom says you forgave her. Did you? The question hung in the damp air. I knelt so we were eye to eye. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, I said gently. But I don't feel angry anymore. And that's enough. She nodded, seeming to understand in the simple, complete way children sometimes do. Then she grinned and said, "Good. 'Cause I like when you smile." We kept walking until the clouds began to break, small shards of sunlight slipping through. Her laughter echoed off the wet pavement, clean and uncomplicated. Back home, the apartment smelled faintly of tea and rain. I changed into a sweater and sat at my desk again. The journal was still open where I'd left it, a blank page waiting. I picked up my pen and began to write, not about Callista, not about what was lost, but about what remained, the lessons, the quiet strength, the unexpected kindness of strangers who believed me before I did. Peace isn't loud. It hums, steady as a heart, constant as a breath. I paused, looking around the room. The rain had stopped, replaced by the soft ticking of the clock and the hum of the city outside. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small inside my own space. I felt enough. We don't always get justice. But sometimes, we get freedom. And sometimes that's louder. I closed the journal gently and looked out the window one last time. The sky had cleared completely, and the light had turned golden, brushing the walls like forgiveness. I whispered, softly but sure, let the silence write the rest. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. And when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't need to shout to be heard. Have you ever been erased from your own story, by family, by power, by the people who said they'd protect you? Tell me in the comments. And if Fern's journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories where quiet voices reclaim their names, one breath, one truth, one chapter at a time.